So we're going to have another small group council. This is the second one, and then there'll be another last one later. So remember some of the ground rules, right, guys? Just reminding us, that it isn't so much a chat, but it is a sharing with the protocol of picking up the quote unquote talking stick. So it's not so much like, okay guys, who's ready, your turn, my turn, whatever. It is allowing for there to be a kind of natural selection when people are ready to share. And you don't have to also. And the lean of expression, be of lean expression, rather, speak from the heart, listen from the heart. And also it's not a debate or a discussion. And when you come back, it's not necessarily that you have to share a summary. This is not really a task. It is very much a process. Okay, just a couple of reminders there. Okay, I think we have most of us here. Let me share what the question is, or rather the framing, if you like. Okay, so in this round, we will explore the experience of silenced knowings, things that you may know somewhere in your subconscious, or even way back in your conscious mind, that is somehow silenced. You're not giving voice to it. Your society is not giving voice to it, and it's so therefore silenced. In this round, we will explore the experience of silenced knowings in your workplace, community, or family group, and the provision of contexts for their voicing. How do we provide spaces for the silenced knowings to be voiced? Let's say this is a context. This space is what we're providing to share whatever silenced knowings individual ones of us has here, and us as a collective. Try to sense something or some things that you know deeply about from your own work or community experience that may be difficult to admit fully to yourself, and even more difficult to express to others in your community. Okay, so let's repeat that. Try to sense something or some things that you know deeply about from your own work or community experience. They may be difficult to admit fully to yourself, and even more difficult to express to others in your community. Yeah, and then the whole concept of silenced knowings in workplace, community, or family group. So, have you ever been able to express this to anyone? This in the context of silenced knowings, things that you have a sense of, but it's hard to admit it even to yourself or to your community. Have you ever been able to express this to anyone? If so, what was the context like that welcomed this knowing into words? What was the context like? What was the space like that welcomed that silenced knowing, so you could put it into words? What was the space that allowed you to bring the knowings or the notions into words? And if you haven't, what are the dynamics that make speaking about this difficult or impossible? What silences our knowing? Okay, so there are dynamics in the workplace, in your community, in your family, that make speaking about this difficult or even impossible. And what is silencing that knowing? What kind of context would be needed within your workplace, community, or family group to welcome this knowing into voice, so that it can become, it can become materialized into words. That would release the hidden spring. So the spring, the mata air that is hidden, the hidden spring of creativity within this knowing. So oftentimes, if any of you read the paper that we shared, it talks about where there is a knowing that is silenced, it is hiding a spring of creativity. So, what would the space be like that would welcome your voice and that would release that hidden spring? Can you feel any ways in which this silencing has ramifications for you in your family life, in your relationship to yourself? So whatever you are silencing within yourself, what are the impacts for you in your family life, even in your relationship to yourself? Okay, you are all in different groups. Someone, or take the initial, the piece, so that you can share. It will be the same groups, I mean five groups, so it'll be about the same numbers, maybe a bit less now, 4 or 5 in each group. We're gonna take 30 minutes. And remember counsel, so there is no egging anyone on, you're not making anybody speak. It's when any one of you is ready, just kind of pick up the talking stick, the virtual talking stick, put your hand up or hold a stick, and then speak. Okay. So it's 1:50. We'll come back at 2:20, and
Yes.
then we see you back here.
All right.
Bye-bye. Okay, so anyone wants to share from that breakout council?
Well, for me, silence knowing conjures those things that that an individual or even perhaps a group knows through some either way they can explain or ways they can't explain. They just know something is true. They may know it with their heads or their bodies. They feel something is true, but it's a thing which, for some reason, there doesn't seem to be space to articulate it. Maybe you can't say it, in your family, or maybe you can't say it in the whole society, but it's a truth that you know and you feel that animates you, but at the same time cannot be in the open.
Maybe I'll share a bit of what we were discussing. I thought Yogi would be more suitable to talk about what we shared. So generally, we feel our culture is well structured. It has certain hierarchies and so forth, the elders and so forth. So when we talk about silence knowing, is that, for example, in a family setting, there is difficult to let the young voice be heard, because it's understood that in the Malay word called beradab, where you say you were cultured or something like that, the young is supposed to listen rather than talk. Okay. Then, of course, in a higher level, because of we might have a family having different religious and ethnic group. So when we sit together, we have to be very sensitive in how we engage with each other, so as not to create situation of discomfort. Yeah, and even to the level at higher learning also, there is so-called sometimes of intellectual silence. Not being able to honestly engage as what you could expect a higher institution would do. Of course, we also think that not everything looks negative. There might be wisdom in the way our culture works. For example, if you have nothing really wise to say, it's better to be quiet rather than expressing things and creating so-called chaos. And finally, we were also worried about how technology is making us no longer to reflect, but to engage quickly, superficially. And that is demanded out of us. And we are worried that this technology-driven engagement will create problems in our society. I think something like that is what we were talking about, basically. Thank you. If I miss something, maybe my other friends in the group can add on. Thank you.
I'm also happy to model and share some of the work I've done with my family's silenced knowings. Would you like to hear?
Yes.
So
Yes.
some of you who know me know that I've been working a lot on this work around World War II, where my matrilineal ancestors, many perished in World War II. Not so much because they were part of anything. They were mostly English-speaking locals in Sandakan. So when during the war, they were also very much associated with the Brits. During the last days of the war, 7 of my male ancestors were executed, which included my great-grandfather and grandfather. This became a silenced knowing within my clan. It was not really talked about. It was often talked about where the women went crazy, or the women went a bit cuckoo for strange reasons. And then in its early 2000s, some of my elders started to plan a reunion for 5 generations of the family. And as part of the reunion prep, they started to look into the history of our ancestors. And this is where they started to write up about these executions, where, when, who. One of my elders reached out to me. I was in the US at this time and said, "Cynthia, can you do the welcome speech?" The reunion was a week long. And I was like, whoa, that's a bit intense. So I said, okay, when something is asked of you like that, you just rise up to it. And I said, can you help me prepare? So he sent me this historical piece that some of my elders had done. And it told the story of these executions. And I just went into like 3 or 4 months of depression. I'm not a depressed person. I think most of you know me. I don't get depressed in that way, but to be in 3 or 4 months of depression was pretty intense. When you actually wake up and you don't know why you're alive or what you have to live for. And I had to go into this place of connecting with that darkness, of having 7 of your male ancestors be beheaded within days of each other. And why were the women the way they were? And then after that, seeing, why am I the way I am? Why am I alone? Why am I, I saw so many generations of the women in my family being in single mother households, but they was just repeating history. So that became a body of work for myself to know to voice and to help my family voice. So then I started to see my mother talk about when her father was taken away and she was a small girl and she never saw him again. And you know, and then the first time I would see her cry, you know, these kinds of things. So since, I guess it's almost 20 years now, it's no longer silenced in my family. It can be talked about. And the hidden springs are, you know, it's tears, it's you know, it's pain, but there's also so much joy. And seeing the women find their softness, seeing the women find their vulnerability has been beautiful. And then connecting with that for myself. So that, I mean, it's a 20 over year body of work for me. And that's just personally. And of course, I've gone on to want to connect with the Japanese executioners, with the, you know, and, you know, so that it doesn't end with my family, because once it's unsilenced within the family, then the springs of you know, creativity are just bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, and you flow with it. So I think that's just, you know, I wanted to share that as an example of something that was silenced, not just by one person, but an entire family. And as this elder silenced it, then it's silenced intergenerationally. So if my grand-aunts didn't talk about it, my aunts didn't talk about it, we didn't talk about it, and the generation after us didn't talk about it. And now, you know, we've had now, I don't know, 8 reunions, and each reunion we talk about it. We even celebrate it. And I see the younger generations, the ones in their 20s and 30s now, actually knowing the history. So I hope that helps provide some understanding about what silence knowings are. And it doesn't have to be about war. I mean, that's a collective trauma that I think a lot of us hold from our history that we don't talk about, but it could be many other traumas, you know, that are also hidden and silenced. Okay, does anyone else want to share? Let's take another, say, 10 minutes.
Hey everyone. So I've spoken a lot over the last day about, you know, feeling like I lack like direction, and, you know, I like that sort of like soul searching, like search for like not feeling rooted, you know, that search for identity and things like that, right? And I was sharing with my group just now about how a lot of it has to do with like how I was raised, you know, like, and I think a lot of the times I tend to sort of like use it as an excuse, because I think if I'm being very honest with myself, right, like I get complacent at times, and I feel very comfortable with like just sort of like not planning ahead and like not setting goals and like not having a clear direction. But like when I'm being very honest with myself, the reason why I'm like that is just because I'm very comfortable at the end of the day, you know, like if I lose a job, I know I can find another one. And I know, and even deeper than that, if I don't work for a year, I know that there's someone that will be able to support me a lot of the time, being my dad. And as like sort of like, especially in the work that a lot of us here do, right, and in a lot that I've been fortunate enough to learn over the last few years, I've developed like this, you know, this sort of like self-righteousness. Like I was telling my group just now about how like, you know, like I get into like little tiffs with my dad sometimes, because like he loves to buy like excessive amounts of food, and it all goes, a lot of it ends up going to waste, right? And you know, that like sort of like that sort of like conflict on like ideas, like ideals and values and stuff like that. But when I reflecting on like the questions of today, like I thought about how like the struggles that my dad went through when he was younger. You know, he had left home when he was like 15. So he's been taking care of himself and the people around him for a really long time. And days where he didn't have anything to eat, you know. So a lot of how he is today and a lot of the things that we disagree on is a lot to do with his own past traumas and his own past experiences. And then thinking about that trauma that he's experienced, you know, like it's funny because like I think on my mom's side, I know quite a lot about like our family history, because she happens to know quite a bit as well. Her and her family talk a lot about it. But on my dad's side, it's a huge question mark. Like I don't know much about my dad's side of the family at all, and he doesn't know much either because he never talked to his family about it. He was never very close to his family growing up. So there's that huge question mark, and I wonder like how much that sort of like lack of knowing and that lack of roots, how much of it I've inherited myself. So yeah, just wanted to share that. I have no conclusion. still percolating, but I just thought I'd share.
Thank you, Emily. Are you guys getting a sense of silence knowings, you think? Let's share another example before we have a break. Maybe this is it's something in the landscape of our work. So those of you who know, we're working in the Babagon watershed with the communities there. And one of the things that happened there in the 90s is the building of the Babagon Dam, where if you live in KK, you're getting your water from there. You are drinking, eating, bathing with water from the Babagon Dam. So there's one village that was displaced, the village of Tampasak. So their land was submerged. Their ancestral graves were submerged. Their farms were submerged, and they were moved to an area, you know, with houses close to each other. Some of us have visited those homes and seen the pictures on their walls of the lands that were submerged. That to me is a silence knowing of the people of KK. We don't think, we turn on our taps and we feel we are entitled to clean water. We will complain if we don't have it. We will blame it on the government if we don't have it. And somehow we have silenced the knowing that some hundreds of people suffered and lost their livelihoods, lost their lands for our water. What would it look like if we voiced that, if we acknowledge that trauma for those people? We heard, we went to visit, we were in solidarity with them. What if we asked our people of KK to visit the watershed? What healing can happen? So I think in talking about ramifications and impacts of our silence knowings, whether it's within our family or our work or our communities, the ramifications for the future is something I think we should all be worried about. What if we displace other people? We displace their livelihoods, we displace their lands, because we say we want to have a swimming pool, we want to have another golf course, We want to have the comforts that we think we should be entitled to. So these are, ramifications. When we're not making known these voices, and learning from them. When in facilitating this process with the government, and I asked once, is it possible that the government can apologize? And I was told, no, they can't apologize, because to apologize would mean they have to apologize for many things. Then I said, well, maybe we need to apologize for those many things. Anyway, so just some things to think about as we take a break. So let's take a break for 10.